Hi. Today we are Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the 27th day of April 2017. I'm not sure, is it a good position? Okay. I will read the key tree from page 176 to 193 in the book Master Keys to Personal Christhood. You have all the other videos before. You can watch my website about that on my website Heaven on Earth Yes. The address is www.heavenonearthyes.wix in English.com/le paradis sur terre. It will be written below the video, and you find many informations in the website of Kim Michaels, askrealjesus.com. Okay, there is a little fog today outside. I think we can see that a little bit with the camera. They said it will be a sunny day in the afternoon. We will see later. It's the morning. Okay, are you ready? I'm ready. I start. Key 3, loving yourself free from conditions. One of the important lessons from Mother Mary's book is that God has both a masculine and a feminine side. For a disciple of the living Christ, it is extremely important to contemplate and internalize this teaching, especially given the fact that mainstream Christianity has become part of the so-called monotheistic religions that largely ignore or deny the feminine aspect of God. Thus, you have likely been brought up with little understanding of the feminine aspect of God, possibly programmed to ignore or even degrade it. As Mother Mary explains, God the Creator started by dividing itself into two polarities, which I undeniably explained in the book of Revelation. I am, quotation, I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the ending, said the Lord, which is and which was and which is to come, the Almighty. Revelation 1:8. Everything in the world of form is created from the interplay of these two complementary forces. Yet, only when the two forces are in a harmonious balance will their creation be sustainable. What is designed to balance the two is the Divine Son, namely the Christ mind. This Christ mind has a universal aspect which unites all life and unites all that is created with the Creator. It also has an individual aspect that can be expressed through any co-creator, even those in embodiment on earth. I came to demonstrate this potential and also demonstrate that when you become the individual expression of the Christ mind, you become one with both the Creator and with all life. This is embedded in the following quotes. I and my Father are one, John 10:30. Also in the quotation, and the King shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as you have done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me. Matthew 25:40. Yet, because self-aware beings have been given free will, It is possible that they can create by using the masculine and feminine expansive and contracting alpha and omega, yang and yin forces in an unbalanced manner. By doing this, co-creators separate themselves from the oneness of all life, seeking to gain advantage for themselves as separate beings rather than seeking to raise up the all, often seeking to raise themselves in comparison to others. This, of course, can be done only through the mind of Antichrist, which is a mind that is separated from the oneness of all life, the river of life, and contains two polarities that do not complement and enhance each other, but instead cancel out and diminish each other. This makes it possible that you can use one unbalanced polarity to raise yourself while using the other polarity to degrade others. My purpose for giving you this teaching is to make you aware that in the realm of Antichrist there are always two opposing polarities. In the previous key, I have had you invoke the higher will of your own being, because overcoming fear must begin with an act of will. However, as I also explained in the last lesson, willpower itself cannot banish fear, for only the perfect love will cast out fear. So, to fully overcome fear, you must allow the unconditional love of God to flow through you. And thus, we also need to address the factors that prevent this love from flowing through your being and expressing itself in the material world. I have said that fear is dangerous because it paralyzes you, so you dare not move, dare not change. Instead, you cling to status quo, even a status quo that causes constant suffering. And since creation starts with an act of will, I will to create, fear is a perversion of will. Yet there are other paralyzing emotions, or one might say that fear has many expressions. Thus, we will next look at a variant of fear that can stop you from stepping onto the path of Christhood, even though you have recognized the path and started to overcome your fear. If you look at mainstream, especially fundamentalist Christians, you will see that most of these people would be afraid to contemplate the central idea behind this course, namely that all people have the potential to follow in my footsteps and attain the Christ consciousness. So this is a fear that would prevent them from even acknowledging the path to Christhood. They would deny that other people could follow me, thus denying my own words, that those who believe on me shall do the works that I did, and they would say that I did not demonstrate the path to Christhood, for I was born in the fullness of that Christhood. Obviously, you have overcome this level of fear. Now, I am not saying this to cause any pride or sense that you are better than others, for it is, as we will discuss in a future key, unnecessary to compare yourself to others based on a value judgment that makes you better or worse than others. However, the concept of a path does imply that you go from step to step, so it is valid to realize that you have risen above some of the lower aspects of the consciousness of death. This gives you a sense of momentum that makes it easier for you to overcome the next challenge. So, what is the next challenge? Well, when you have started to overcome the paralyzing aspects of fear and attained some will to experiment with the path to Christhood, you will face the challenge to overcome a set of obstacles that is designed to prevent you from exercising your will. In other words, the most paralyzing fear is meant to prevent you from even attaining the willpower to change your life, and the next challenge is meant to prevent you from acting on your determination. This challenge is the very subtle sense that although you now recognize the path to Christhood as a potential for all people, it doesn't really apply to you. You simply don't have what it takes to follow the path. You are not smart enough, spiritual enough, or worthy. The path is too overwhelming or complicated for you. You have made this or that mistake in the past, and thus you are not worthy to walk the path. Or what if trying to remove the beam in your own eye exposes some incredibly bad flaw in your personality that makes you feel really guilty? You are simply too inferior, or who do you think you are to even contemplate that you could follow in Jesus' footsteps? One can characterize all of these feelings as guilt, but as you can see, there are many nuances. The overall theme being that although you now see the path, you are not able or worthy to follow it. In other words, this is an attempt to prevent you from stepping onto the path and accepting yourself as a worthy disciple of the living Christ. Where does this attempt come from? It comes from the ego and the consciousness of Antichrist. At this point, you might think of the ego as an active force in your container of self, a force that is always seeking to prevent you from taking the next step on the path of Christhood, because if you do, it will have lost some degree of control over the conscious you. In a sense, one can say that each step on the path represents a particular illusion or aspect of the ego that the conscious you needs to overcome. You do so by coming to see it for the illusion that it is, and thus separating yourself from it by realizing that you are more than this. We have now seen that the first step on the path is to overcome the anti-will, and this anti-will is a perversion of the masculine principle. It is God the Father who has the will to create. Yet, as I have explained, there are always two polarities. So, the masculine perversion of anti-will must have an opposite, or feminine polarity. And whereas the masculine is the active principle, the feminine is the receiving principle. So, the perversion of anti-will is designed to prevent you from receiving that which you are entitled to receive when you have mustered the will to change, namely the help from above that empowers you to change. As I explained in the last key, you can overcome fear only through the unconditional love of God. This love is beyond any form of love that can be produced in the material realm, so you simply cannot manufacture it on your own. You can only receive it from the spiritual realm, and the perversion of guilt inferiority is designed to prevent you from accepting that you are capable of or worthy to receive God's love. The first line of defense for the ego is to seek to prevent you from gathering the willpower to confront your fears. The next line is to seek to prevent you from receiving the perfect love that will fully cast out your fears. In other words, the process of overcoming fear involves both the masculine and feminine aspects. You must gather the willpower to confront your fears as a foundation for opening up the flow of love that will truly consume the fears. Here is where I need you to contemplate something very seriously. If you have grown up in the Western world or in any religion that denies the feminine aspect of God, you have been programmed to approach religion as a passive measure. As I have said, I have been portrayed as the Savior who is going to do all the work for you because you are not worthy in yourself. This has programmed you to subconsciously deny that you are worthy to receive God's love. As long as you have this programming in your subconscious mind, you will not be able to receive that love, and you cannot fully escape your fears. Thus, we need to dispose of that programming, and how can this be done? The essential key is to realize the full importance of the statement that everything is created from the interplay of the masculine and feminine forces, but that a sustainable creation comes about only when the two forces are balanced by the Christ mind. The consequence of this is that any perversion of the two forces is attained through a perversion of the Christ mind, namely the consciousness of Antichrist. Thus, the key to overcoming any perversion of the two forces is to seek for the reality of Christ, which can expose the illusions of Antichrist and thus empower the conscious you to separate itself from them. It is the truth of Christ that will make you free. With all thy getting, get the understanding of Christ. Let us now look at the Christ reality concerning your ability to follow the path to Christhood and your worthiness to receive God's love. To fully understand this, you need to let go of several common illusions, and let us start by discussing the concept of original sin. This sin is the idea that you were born into a sinful state and thus not worthy of God's love. Let me make it clear that I did not preach the concept of original sin, and it was indeed a later misinterpretation that gave rise to this idea. However, it is important for you to understand some of the ramifications of the idea because it has affected humankind's self-image in subtle ways. One of the essential elements of Christ consciousness is the ability and willingness to ask penetrating questions, which empowers you to see the inconsistencies and lack of logic in ideas that most people take for granted and thus never question. In other words, an inescapable part of the path is your willingness to question ideas that you have been brought up, programmed to accept without ever questioning them. So, let us ask a few questions about original sin. The concept implies that all people are born in an imperfect state, which makes them unworthy of salvation, and this is why they need an external savior, such as myself or an outer church. If we take the traditional Christian belief system, God created your soul shortly before your body was born, and thus your soul has never existed before. So, if you are affected by original sin, it would mean that God either created you as a sinner, or at least wanted you to start out life in a sinful state. There are several problems with this line of reasoning. First of all, the traditional Christian view is that God is almighty and thus perfect, and He is also loving. So it makes no sense that a perfect God would make a mistake and create you as an imperfect sinner. Yet, if God didn't make a mistake, it must mean He wants you to be a sinner. And this doesn't sound like a loving God. So, something is obviously inconsistent in the entire idea. The concept of original sin says that since all human beings descended from Adam and Eve, they are affected by the original sin committed by those supposedly first people. Obviously, this is an erroneous concept, as Montreal explains in great detail in his book. What I want to bring up here is that we have much the same problem as mentioned above. The Bible does not say that Adam and Eve were treated as sinners, but unless God created them with a propensity to sin. How can we explain that they actually sinned? And why would a perfect and loving God create the first people with this propensity to sin? Traditional and fundamentalist Christianity has no answers to this. But the obvious answer is that God did not create anyone with a propensity to sin. However, all self-aware beings are given free will, which gives them the option to go against God's laws. So we now see that Adam and Eve sinned because they used their free will to make a choice. We can also see that they did not actually make a free choice, for they were deceived by the serpent and thus did not truly know what they were doing and did not understand the consequences. Again, Montreal explains this in greater detail, but my point is that we now see that sin is not a condition created by God. It is the result of people using their free will while under the influence of the consciousness of Antichrist. We can now see that if you were born into sin because of a choice made by two people thousands of years ago, this would actually be a violation of the principle of free will. You see, free will necessitates that you are created as a separate individual who is not inherently affected by the choices of other people. So, if you were born into sin because of the choice made by Adam and Eve, you would not have been born with free will. They had the choice to stay away from sin, but you did not. Obviously, this would be a clear violation of the principle of free will. Why is all this important? Because when we add reincarnation, we can now see that you might have been born with certain imperfections in this life, but they were not the result of some original sin. Instead, your particular karmic circumstances are the results of choices you made in past lifetimes. The essential implication of this is that you are not the helpless victim of some unjust God or of the choices of other people. You are the author and finisher of your own destiny, and thus, no matter what mistakes you have made in the past, you have the potential to rise above them. How can I say that? Because if your past mistakes were caused by anyone outside yourself, be it God, other people, or the abominable snowman, there would be nothing you could do about it. You would be at the mercy of external forces. Yet, if your mistakes were the results of choices you made, then you can undo those past choices. How do you undo the imperfect choices from the past? Very simple. You realize that all imperfect choices were made under the influence of the consciousness of Antichrist, and they can be replaced by making choices that are based on the consciousness of Christ. It really is that simple, although there are numerous forces in the material world, including many secular and religious institutions, who will deny this basic truth. Yet contemplate what I am truly saying here. God has given you free will, and the Creator respects its own laws. Thus, God will never take away your free will. This is proven by the fact that you have the ability to go against God's laws, whether you call this sinning, making karma, or something else. Do you see the reality here? The very fact that you are in an imperfect state actually proves that God has given you truly free will. And this also proves that God will let you do whatever you want with that free will. Obviously, God will let you experience the consequences of your choices. But as Maitreya explains so profoundly, if your choices had no consequences, or if you did not experience them, you would not actually have free will. You have the option to learn by following a loving teacher, or learn by experiencing the consequences of your choices. My point here is that God will never take away your freedom of choice, and this is actually the very mechanism that gives you the potential to walk the path of Christhood and enter God's kingdom. You see what has caused you to fall into an imperfect state is that you started making choices while under the influence of the illusions of Antichrist, as depicted in how the serpent deceived Eve in the garden. Again, Maitreya explains this in greater detail, but my point here is that it is not God who takes away your free will, but the consciousness of Antichrist and the beings who embody it. You see, Eve did make a choice to eat the forbidden fruit, meaning engage in the consciousness of duality. But it was not a truly free choice. There is an old saying that if people knew better, they would do better, and it is true. If people truly understand what they are doing, they will not deliberately hurt themselves. The consequence is that you only made imperfect choices because you did not have the full understanding of what you were doing, which means that you can seek a higher understanding with all thy get understanding, and this will give you a foundation for making better choices. Why is this such an important idea? Because one of the most subtle tricks used by the ego and the prince of this world, even many earthly institutions, is that once you have made a mistake, you can never escape it, at least not on your own. In other words, the fact that you have made mistakes in the past means that you cannot rise above them on your own. You made the mistakes, but you cannot unmake them, which is why you need an external savior or church in order to be free from your sins. This idea is one of the most subtle and most effective lies in the devil's toolkit, and most people have been affected by it. So let me say this again. The consciousness of Antichrist is what takes away your free will. It does so by tricking you into making decisions based on limited or erroneous information. Once you have been blinded by this consciousness of duality, The prince of this world and your ego want to keep you blind so that you continue to make unfree choices. In contrast, God never takes away your free will. God allows you to make the decision to partake of the consciousness of duality and make decisions based on it. But God leaves open your potential to, at any time, choose to reach beyond duality and seek for the truth of Christ, so that you can again get back to a state of consciousness in which you see reality and can thus make truly free choices. Do you see the essential truth here? The forces of duality want to make you believe that once you have partaken of the consciousness of duality, you are caught forever and cannot escape on your own. Yet God's reality is that you can never lose the potential to reach beyond duality, precisely because you have free will. None of your choices can be binding forever. Any choice you have ever made can be undone by making a better choice. Any choice based on the duality of Antichrist can be completely undone and erased by making a choice based on the reality of Christ. It is the truth that will make you free. But it does so by empowering you to make better choices. God simply wants you to rise above the consciousness of duality, and you can never lose the potential to do so. The forces of Antichrist do not want you to rise, so they seek to prevent you from accepting your potential to come up higher by making you believe that for whatever reason you are stuck forever. Having given you this teaching, we now need to deal with a very subtle point that is often misunderstood by spiritual seekers. What I have said above is that you are in an imperfect state as a result of choices you made. Thus, if you can get yourself into an imperfect situation through your own choices, you can also get yourself out of that situation through your own choices. In other words, your salvation depends exclusively on your choices. However, here is where it gets subtle. You can be saved only based on the choices you make, but you cannot save yourself exclusively through your own power and faculties. In other words, you must act as if you can save yourself, but in reality, you cannot save yourself. Let me explain. I earlier said that you can't solve a problem with the same state of consciousness that created the problem. Thus, once you have become blinded by the duality consciousness, you cannot use the logic of the mind of Antichrist to overcome the duality consciousness. No matter how sophisticated and intellectual understanding of the material universe you might have, as materialistic science is striving to attain, you cannot use it to escape duality. In order to be free of suffering, you must reach for something beyond duality, namely the reality of the Christ mind. I also said that what will truly consume negative emotions, such as fear and also guilt, is love. Yet the conditional love that is a result of the duality consciousness is not sufficient to consume fear. Thus, loving yourself in a human way will not help you rise above fear. What you truly need is the perfect, non-dualistic, unconditional love of God. You cannot produce this love from within yourself, but you can receive it from a higher source. So, what I am saying here is that you are currently trapped in an imperfect state, and you cannot save yourself from that state by using what is available to you in the state of duality. You can be saved only through the wisdom and the love of God. So, in one sense, you cannot save yourself because you cannot produce what is needed for your salvation. Yet, in another sense, you can save yourself by opening yourself up to the divine energies that will produce your salvation. Here is where we run into an even more subtle lie from the consciousness of Antichrist, a lie you have been programmed to believe over many lifetimes, a lie so subtle that over 99% of the people of this planet simply don't know enough to even question it. They take it for granted because to them it appears that this is simply the way life is. Truly, this lie proves that once a planet sinks into duality, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. What is this lie? The lie is that in order to receive anything from God, be it grace, wisdom, forgiveness, or love, you need to meet certain conditions, specifically conditions defined on earth. In other words, this lie makes the claim that God's love is not unconditional, but is given only to those who meet certain conditions. This is truly an example of how the consciousness of duality perverts everything. The Bible says that God created man in his image and likeness. But the reality is that after human beings fell into duality, they have created a God in the image and likeness of the dualistic self. This is a clear violation of the first two commandments because it creates a graven dualistic image of God and elevates it to the status of a God, thus obscuring the real God. It is the ego's tendency to create mental images and project them onto the screen of life, thus worshipping the images instead of seeing reality. At this point, you might be thinking that surely I cannot mean what I am saying, for clearly life in the material world confirms that God's love is conditional. You probably are not experiencing God's love at this moment, and thus does not prove that God's love is conditional? Obviously, the reason you are not experiencing love must be that you are not meeting the conditions God has defined for receiving it. In other words, the logic is that you want God's love, so the fact that you don't have it must mean that God is withholding it from you. And while this is a logical line of reasoning, it is only logical based on your current state of consciousness. The reality is that God has defined no conditions for you receiving God's love. You are the one who has defined, or at least accepted, what is defined by others, the conditions that make you think you are not worthy to receive God's love. Thus, you are using your free will, the ultimate love for this universe, to close your being off and prevent God's love from flowing through you. Obviously, because God respects your free will, no being in heaven will force you to receive love if you are not willing to open yourself to it. Let me give you a deeper understanding of the dynamic at work here. The following is a brief summary of the process that has led to the creation of the material universe, based on what Mother Mary and Montreal describe in their books. The material universe is only one part in a larger whole. The creation of this whole started when God, the Creator, created a void that had absolutely nothing in it. The Creator then projected itself into the void in the form of light, and this light formed a sphere that was set apart from the nothingness of the void. The Creator then used the light in this sphere to create structures that formed the basis for life. Finally, the Creator projected self-aware extensions of its own being into the void. These beings have the same creative abilities as the Creator, in the sense that they had the power of mind to use the Creator's light to form organized structures. They could not produce this light on their own, but they could be the open door for the light and gave it form, thus serving as co-creators with the Creator. The co-creators in the first sphere were not created with the same awareness and mastery as the Creator, but through experimenting with their abilities, they gradually attained mastery. As part of this process, they served as conduits through which the Creator could send more light into the first sphere, and they directed that light into forming structures that built upon the Creator's foundation. When the first sphere had reached a certain stage of organization and light intensity, the creative process was taken to the next level. A new sphere was created, and the masters from the first sphere created structures within it. These masters then projected self-aware extensions of themselves into the next sphere, and these beings again served as co-creators who helped raise up their sphere from within. This process of creation has continued through several spheres, and the material universe is the most dense part of the latest sphere of God. The point of this teaching is that the very fact that you are a self-aware being in the material universe proves that you are currently filling the position as a co-creator with God. The function of a co-creator is, as the name says, to help co-create the world in which it lives. A co-creator does this in the following ways. By connecting to the sphere right above it in vibration and receiving a stream of spiritual life from that realm. By connecting to the Christ mind and using that mind to direct the spiritual light into creating structures that are sustainable and that enrich both itself and all life in its sphere. By fulfilling this role, a co-creator will grow in awareness until it can permanently ascend to a higher realm and continue its growth from there. It will also help raise its native sphere until the sphere is so filled with light that it becomes the foundation for the next level in the creative process. Why is this important? Well, it shows why you are here, namely to serve as a co-creator. The Bible actually describes this in veiled language by saying that God created humans in His image and likeness and gave them dominion over the earth. Yet the real point is that you are not a material or human being, nor are you a miserable sinner. You were created as a co-creator with God, and you were designed to fulfill this position in the cosmic hierarchy. Do you understand what I am saying? I have said that you have descended into an imperfect state from which you need to be saved. I have said that in order to be saved, you need the wisdom of the Christ mind and the unconditional love of God. I have also said that you have been programmed to believe that receiving this wisdom and love depends on you living up to certain conditions. What you now see is that you not need to live up to any conditions in order to receive wisdom and love. Why not? Because from the very beginning you were designed to have God's wisdom and love flowing through your being. You were designed to be a co-creator, and you create by directing the flow of love based on the wisdom of the Christ mind. Doing this is what you were designed to do. It is as natural for the conscious you to receive wisdom and love as it is for your physical body to breathe, digest food, or have your earth beat. Do you see what I am saying? You do not need to fulfill any conditions in order to receive God's wisdom and love. You only need to accept who you already are. The reason why you are not currently having God's wisdom and love flowing through you is not that you do not meet certain conditions on earth. The reason is that you have forgotten who you are, or that you have accepted certain lies that cause you to deny who you are. And it is this denial that shuts off the natural flow of love, light, and truth through your being. Once you get out of this unnatural state of illusions, you will get back to your natural state of oneness with your source. Imagine that you meet an eagle who is walking on the ground. You ask it, remember, this is an imaginary example. Why are you walking? Why are you flying? It answers, no. Why are you walking? Why aren't you flying? It answers, I can fly. You say, what do you mean? There appears to be nothing wrong with your wings. Surely you can fly. That's what eagles do. It says, no, I really can't fly. Other eagles might be able to, but I can't. My point being, of course, that eagles are designed to fly, and thus they have an inherent ability to fly. Flying is a natural state, and the ego, in our example, has simply been tricked into denying its inherent ability to fly. Likewise, most people on this planet have been tricked into denying their inherent ability to be the open doors for the wisdom of the Christ mind and the unconditional, meaning that it consumes all conditions and limitations, love of God. As I have said, the consciousness of duality blinds you to reality. Thus, once you are blind, you can be controlled by the prince of this world and your ego. However, they can only control you as long as they can keep you blind, meaning that they will do anything to make sure that you will remain in a blind state. They would gladly have you believing that you are a material being or a mortal sinner with no potential whatsoever of escaping that state. They want you to be imprisoned in a total way, meaning you think there is no alternative to the prison. You think it is normal to be imprisoned. However, as I explained, most people will eventually come to see the internal contradictions in a dualistic worldview, meaning that they become open to the concept that there is something beyond the prison and that escape might be possible. Yet, all is not lost for the forces of duality, and their second line of defense is to portray God as a conditional being, meaning that you have to live up to certain conditions defined by duality, in order to qualify for entry into God's kingdom. Can you see that this is a blind alley that can never take you to your destination? Do you see why this is an incredible, subtle and sinister strategy? I have explained many times now that you cannot solve a problem with the consciousness that created it. The problem is that you are trapped in duality, yet the prince of this world wants you to believe that the only way to escape duality is to live up to certain dualistic conditions. For people trapped in duality, this seems logical, but it is truly the broad way that leads to destruction. It can never work. The only way to be saved is to rise above all dualistic conditions and be who you are. It is the conditions you have accepted that prevent God's wisdom and love from flowing through you, and thus only by overcoming all such conditions can you receive the truth and the love that will make you free. So it is not a matter of meeting certain conditions, but of abandoning all conditions and the entire state of consciousness that defines conditions for everything. My beloved, do you grasp what I have given you here? You may think this sounds abstract, theoretical, or difficult to implement. Yet, this teaching is very practical, realistic, and it is actually easy to implement. In fact, it might be called the secret of life, the master key to salvation. Being saved is not a matter of becoming what you are. It is a matter of overcoming the illusion that you are not saved and coming back to a state of consciousness in which you fully accept who you are and what you were created to be. How can I say that this teaching is easy to implement? Because in reality, it requires no effort. You see, what I am telling you here is that having God's wisdom and love flowing through you is the natural state for a co-creator. Being in this state means that you are one with the forward movement of life itself. You are flowing with the river of life. What you are doing now is actually resisting the movement of life itself. You have stepped outside the river of life, yet the river has not stopped flowing. Therefore, staying outside the river requires constant effort, and this is precisely what turns your life into an ongoing struggle. Imagine being in a physical river and gently flowing with the stream. No resistance is necessary, no struggle is required, other than the willingness to flow with life. Now imagine that you decide to stamp your feet against the river bottom and resist the forward movement. Obviously, this will not stop the river, so you need to exert a constant effort in order to stay in one place. You may feel as if the river is resisting your desire to stay in one place, but the river is simply doing what it was designed to do, and you are the one resisting the natural flow. You are refusing to transcend yourself by holding on to what you have now, whereas the river is constantly transcending itself as God intended. My point is that once you step into the duality consciousness, you are resisting the natural flow of the life force, and doing this requires a constant effort on your part. You have to continually resist the flow of life, and this is what turns your life into a struggle. Yet, somehow, the ego and the prince of this world have managed to make you believe in a set of illusions that gives you the impression that it is easier to stay in the duality consciousness and that it requires some superhuman effort in order to get back into the flow of life. In a sense, it does require a superhuman effort to walk the path to Christhood, the secret being that you were created as a superhuman being, and thus it is simply a matter of doing what you are designed to do. Once you fully understand the path and stop resisting it, you will see that it's easier for you to return to oneness with the river of life than it is to keep resisting the flow. This is what I expressed in veiled language in the situation of Paul's awakening. Quotation. And Saul, yet breathing out threatenings and slaughter against the disciples of the Lord, went unto the high priest, and desired of him letters to Damascus, to the synagogues, that if he found any of this way, whether they were men or women, he might bring them bound unto Jerusalem. And as he journeyed, he came near Damascus, and suddenly there shined round about him a light from heaven, and he fell to the earth, and heard a voice saying unto him, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And he said, Who art you, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom thou persecutest. It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. Acts chapter 9. Kicking against the pricks means resisting the natural movement of life itself. Do you now see why I earlier said that the hallmark of the ego is resistance? The ego is created out of separation from the river of life, and thus its very nature is resistance. Your ego will never stop resisting the river of life, but when your conscious self separates itself from the ego's illusions, you can stop the resistance. You can then surrender yourself into the river of life and be reborn of water and of spirit. On a more practical note, I fully realize that what I have given you in this case is a very advanced teaching, and you might not be fully ready for it. Yet what I wanted to do was to plant a seed in your mind, namely the idea that following the path to Christhood is not some superhuman activity, but is a perfectly natural process. It is not a matter of becoming a saint, but a matter of accepting who you were created to be and returning to that sense of identity. Thus, you have access to everything that is needed right within yourself, which is truly what I meant when I said that the kingdom of God is within you. We now come to the conclusion of this key, which is the realization that what will fully consume your fear is that you receive the unconditional love that God has for you personally. And in order to receive that love, you simply need to allow it to follow its natural course and flow through you. Why do you think I said, quotation, that you may be the children of your Father which is in heaven? For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. Matthew 5:45. You see, God's love is constantly being offered to every human being without conditions, such as a dualistic evaluation of who is evil and good, just and unjust. Your only choice regarding God's love is to accept it or reject it. And it is precisely the illusions of Antichrist that have caused you to accept a set of conditions that makes you believe that, for whatever reason, you have to reject God's love until you have met these worldly conditions. What I am saying here is that perfect love will cast out fear, but in order to receive it, you must accept that you are worthy to receive it, which means you must overcome the conditions that currently cause you to reject the perfect love that is that it is the Father's God pleasure to give you, or that it is the Mother's God pleasure to give you. Yet I realize that giving you this teaching is not necessarily enough to help you stop rejecting God's love. For consider my sayings, quotation, and as you would that men should do to you, do you also to them likewise. Luke 6:31. Judge not, that you be not judged. For with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged, and with what measure you meet, it shall be measured to you again. Matthew chapter 7. The deeper meaning here is that everything you do is a reflection